So as of the time of filming this video, Ninjago have had 3 sublines in its lifespan that have given us variants of different types of sets. And by different variants of sets, I mean that the waves that we received coincided with Ninjago, but not directly in terms of where the show was at that point. Now, I've already talked about 2 of these lines, one fully and one briefly in this video here, and this is still a very good video in my opinion, and I do recommend you check it out. But as I teased around a month ago now, I did say I would talk about the final subline of Ninjago, which are the movie sets. And in a similar vein to the core video, I will cover it under different subjects so I can break it apart much easier, starting with... So in 2013 it was announced that we were gonna get a fully animated Ninjago movie to coincide with the new LEGO movie universe, and to say the least, the Ninjago fans were loving it. It was actually meant to be released at the end of 2016, but unfortunately it had to be delayed, and that is where Day of the Departed came from. But for what it was worth, it did come out eventually in September of 2017. Now, I could go into a whole rant about the Ninjago movie, because spoiler alert, I do love the movie, but there are a lot of glaring issues with it. But if you would want to see a review of the movie itself, let me know. But coming alongside this movie was 2 waves of Ninjago movie sets, and whether you love them or hate them, they certainly left an impact on the Ninjago community. This is mostly down to the fact that these sets spawned some of the greatest sets we've ever had, and they were so large and so ambitious, and it was quite new for what we had at the time. But for what it was worth, people really did enjoy them. But speaking of the sets, and now I've given all the context I really would want to give without doing a full-blown movie review, let's get to... So while I did say that people love the movie set, me included, I will say that there are some that are a bit of a mixed bag. But that definitely doesn't take away from the fact that there are so many sets in the Ninjago movie that to this day are people's favourites. You have sets like the Ninjago City, the City Docks, you have the Bounty, and you have all the ninjas mechs as well. It's such an incredible mixed bag of sets. But the problem is there are just some of those sets out there that people just aren't the biggest fan of. Possibly the best example in my opinion are those little smaller sets that have those shark themed enemy vehicles, because they weren't really the best to say the least. The octopus one was just a bit weird. It didn't really have much of a display factor because it was meant to be floating, but yet we still got it, and I don't even think I picked that set up. You got that weird little shark walker that gave us the first instance of the new Lady Iron Dragon figure, so a lot of people picked it up for that reason, me included, but ultimately the build wasn't that good. And then you had some of those just tiny little sets that didn't really coincide with this movie all that much, but they still existed nonetheless, and they were still great for what they were worth. But the problem was just that they weren't really good compared to some of the others. That little training set that you could get with Zane and Kai, it was alright for what it was worth. It was a good way to get the Zane and Kai minifigures. But the point is that they were already quite easy to get as is. You had stuff like the polybags, which had the little miniature version of the ninja mechs, the Quake mech, you had the Ice Tank, Lloyd's Dragon. They were all just little polybags, and I understand they didn't intend as actual sets, but the point is that they were still sets nonetheless that I have to include for comparison. The thing is that I'm not saying all the tiny sets were bad, because there was one polybag that came with a hooded Lloyd, but the actual hoodie itself was open, revealing his ninja outfit, which was exclusive, and it is a very nice minifigure. And while they're technically exclusives as well, you did have those little pods that came with the ninja in those white Woo Crew outfits, but they're not for me. The third category, I guess, of these like minifigure little packs that you could get were ones that were technically exclusive but just didn't have anything really exciting about them. And I would say the main instance of that is probably that Kendo Lloyd that you could get. It wasn't exclusive really in any way apart from the armor, but it was still technically exclusive nonetheless. And this is why I do call into question the idea of whether the Ninjago sets are good, because they do have these amazing sets, but the problem is that they are watered down by other sets that feel like they were just compromised in favor of the bigger ones. But if we do move up to the more mid-range sets for comparison, I will say that again, there are some great sets, but there are some that just a bit fall short. And by mid-range, I am talking about sets that were probably around 20 to 40 in range, because the Ninjago movie had some massive sets, so that's why I'm going to consider the mid-range. And like I said, that mixed bag goes crazy. You have that shark bomber jet thing that I had, and I didn't mind it, but again, to say the least, like most of the shark vehicles, I just wasn't really a fan of it. But then LEGO came in and just gave us some bangers, like the Master Fall set, and to this day, I think it's one of the better sets we've gotten. It's crazy to think that this set was like £25 at the time, I believe it was, and it came out so good, and it had such a good selection of minifigures as well. The last of the mid-range sets, I would say, is probably Nia's Water Strider, and again, I do think this was a very cool set, and it was one that I did enjoy handling at the time, because it felt very unique. But the problem with it was the fact that it was quite small in comparison to the rest of the Ninja's vehicles, so it just looked a little out of place. It definitely could have benefited from being a much bigger set. But speaking of bigger sets, this is where we get into the real meat of things, because the Ninjago movie sets were massive in terms of their price points. And the problem is that it really did affect a lot of people's wallets, mine included. But if I do go from like my least favorite to my favorite in terms of the larger sets, the first one is probably going to be that massive shark weapon vehicle that Garmadon used at the start of the movie. I don't know, I never picked this set up because it never really interested me, and I know it went alright with Lloyd's Dragon, but to me it was just a weird set, and I just didn't really enjoy it. But if you can't tell, I clearly don't really like the shark vehicles, and it's not that I don't outright like them for no particular reason, I just think they fell short when in comparison to the other ones, and there is a shark vehicle coming up that I do actually like. But more on that in a minute. The next of the big sets was probably going to be Jay's Lightning Jet. I don't know why, but for me, it just didn't really handle nicely. It just kind of fell apart. It was just a bit strange. It was probably my least favorite of the Ninja vehicles. Maybe not including Nia's Water Strider because of the size. But overall, it was still alright. It's just it fell short in comparison to the rest. I'd probably say the Garmadon's Volcano base set weird thing is probably the next one up. Because again, it was a pretty cool set, but it came out in the second wave of the Ninjago movie, so I don't really think it gained that much traction. And the problem with it was that I think it was just a bit too small for what it was. It could have benefited from being a lot bigger. But now we're basically getting into the larger sets that I do enjoy. But here we go. I'd probably say that Zane's Ice Tank was next. Again, it wasn't one that I personally picked up, but it was one that I did want. And it is a really cool looking build, but it was just never enough to justify the price point for me. Then I would probably go with Cole's Quake Mech, because again, was really cool looking, and I think Cole's Quake Mech is one of the most unique looking mechs that we've had in the show. That massive wheel is amazing. But again, I think the problem was that it just felt weird, and I never justified buying it at the time, because those Wave 2 Ninjago movie sets came out around the time of the Sons of Garmadon. So I was all up in the Season 8 sets personally. But I am going to get to a shark weapon or vehicle that I do actually like. The Garmadon mech was a very cool looking set, and it is one I still display to this day. Again, the problem is that it's probably too small. And I know I keep saying that, but clearly size matters in this regard. But speaking of size, we're going to show off Kai's Fire Mech now. And this is such a good looking set to me. And it again is one I still display to this day. It just has such a presence about him. I remember having so much fun building the set as well. It's extremely sturdy. I once dropped it and it didn't break. But yeah, this is an amazing set. And I think anyone who owns it probably agrees. But of course, the last of the Ninja vehicles is going to be the favorite of the bunch, and it is Lloyd's Dragon, because again, it is just extremely cool to say the least, and it's probably one of the better sets that we ever had out of the movie line. I'm definitely making this a lot longer than it needs to be, but I promise we're nearly at the end of all the sets. But I would say that the Temple of Ultimate Doom is probably next up in terms of the greatness of Ninjago movie, because this is an amazing looking temple, and again, it is one that I still display to this day, and it has such a presence about him. I actually have it displayed next to the lighthouse from season 6, and it just makes the lighthouse look tiny in comparison. It's just such a good looking build. I'm going to bundle the second favorite in with each other because they're both the Ninjago city modulars that we have. It's the dock one and it's the main city itself, and unfortunately I don't have either of them, but they are brilliant to say the least. They are such good looking sets, and I wish I had the space for them, and that's the reason I never got them. But they are amazing, and I have seen them in person, and there's nothing better looking than when you get these massive modulars. But of course that means my favorite is the Bounty. Of course, I still display the Bounty. It's still quite prevalent. It's stood on its own in terms of my Lego. But the thing is that it's possibly the best Bounty, and they've never been able to improve on it since, in my opinion. But let me know if you do prefer any of the other Bounties. But that is about a look at all of the sets that I wanted to talk about, and I know I did talk about most of them and longed it out a little bit. But the thing is that I really do think it contributes to the question of, is the Ninjago line good? Because the sets ultimately are the bulk of it. But the other main part of it is, to say the least, we did receive a lot of minifigures for the line of the Ninjago movie. And to go over them briefly, the ninja's main ninja outfit, I would say, are pretty good in the grand scheme of things for the movie. I do think they stand on their own 2 feet and make for a nice little unique take on the ninja. Does that mean I think they're the best suits ever? No, I don't think they even cracked the top 10. But the thing is that I think they were really good for the movie, and I think that is what matters here. The ninja did also get their casual outfits for once, and this is the main way of having them. Because while later on, they did release urban versions of Cole and Jay, the thing is that these, to this day, are still considered the main version of the casual ninja. And they are really good. The only problem with it is, good luck getting them all. Like I said, the ninja did also get those white Woo Crew outfits, and they also did get black ones. But the problem is that they're just kind of bad. I don't really like them, to say the least. They're kind of just there, but they're still there nonetheless. I don't personally display any of them with those outfits on, but they are an option, I guess. But I salute you if you decide to use them. We also did get a nice handful of civilian minifigures, which is really nice. It really did fill out the world of Ninjago, and I do think they're trying to make more of an effort to do that now, because we do have a lot of interesting side characters finally in minifigure form to this day. The fact that Gale Gossip exists, the fact that Racer 7 exists, the fact that Borg finally exists is just nothing short of a miracle, and I'm glad that the Ninjago movie started the trend. The Shark Thugs are pretty cool, all things considered. They're fairly unique, to say the least. There are some I find a bit odd, to say the least as well. But overall, I do think they're a really cool looking army. I just don't think they hold a candle to some of the more prevalent Ninjago ones. And Garmadon even had his fair share of minifigures this time round. He had his caped version, he had his non-caped version, he had his jungle version, he had his suit version, and he had a pajama version. They really did lean into Garmadon this time round, and I love it because there's so many fun variants of him now. And I do think any Ninjago fan would love to have him. But this is certainly a more brief look at the Ninjago movie minifigures, but the main thing about this video is, were the sets good? And the minifigures do call that into question, but I would say overall that they do have a really nice complement to the sets. But the only other thing I haven't talked about is, this is the one and only time that Ninjago has had a CMF series, and to say the least, it was good, but we need another. The fact that we did get 20 minifigures that we could collect, and they were all very nicely detailed, to say the least, was amazing to see. The only problem with it was the fact that there wasn't much in there that really attracted the Ninjago fans in. Now, I collected these, to say the least. I think I got to 18 of them, but then I just spread them out into my collection afterwards. But the problem with them was the fact that when Ninjago fans say they want a CMF, they do want to cover some of the figures that we just never got that were important to the show. The problem with this line is the fact that we just got like more Shark Warriors, we got a weird version of Garmadon with a hat, we got the exact same Lloyd that we had in all the sets, the exact same Woo in all the sets, stuff like that. It just wasn't really the best. But for what it was worth, this line did fill the corners for us a nice little bit. The main thing I would say is that it was what gave us the casual version of Cole, Jay, and Zane. But the only problem with it is just the fact that the other 10 or so were just a bit bad. This just definitely felt like a massive tease from LEGO, because they know that the Ninjago fans want a CMF, and this is the only time we got one. And I think because it didn't really have the best variants of figures, I think they probably assumed that we didn't actually want them. Which is a shame, because there's nothing more I would love than to have a new Ninjago CMF. But let's actually answer the question that I'm setting out to ask here. is the line of the Ninjago movie good? And while ultimately everything is subjective, and I would love to hear your guys' opinions in the comments, I do think that this line was successful. Now, to compare it to the other two, do I prefer this line to Core or Legacy? And I do prefer it to Core, but I still think Legacy is the reigning champion of the Ninjago sublines. But I definitely think that the Ninjago movie lines provided us with so much more good than bad, and I think to this day, it provided us with sets that a lot of people would love to display. Like I said, I do believe that the Ninjago movie bounty is the best version of the bounty we've ever had, and I don't think they ever were able to top it. And this has come from someone who would have died for the possession bounty back in the day. But there are ultimately a lot of detractors from this line. Ultimately, all those weird little sets that we got that didn't really have much relevance to the show, and also felt just weirdly produced for no reason. I mean, who asked for a Ninjago movie maker set? What was that? But with any single line, you do have to take the good and the bad at the same time, because I'm not saying that Legacy is perfect, because it certainly had its fair share of sets that I didn't particularly like. And that's why I'm going to say on an overall that the Ninjago movie sets are good. Because I've taken the good from the bad, I've given a very good look at the sets to say the least, I've given a good overview on the minifigures, the CMF, all the main aspects of these lines. And I do believe on an overall that they were good, especially if you were there for the time. I remember having so much fun with these sets, they were everywhere, LEGO was pushing these sets out, and it was a great time to say the least. And to this day, some of those sets are now worth a fair bit, because of how great that they were put together. But yeah, I would love to know what you guys think, and I do hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you do enjoy the Ninjago movie set, and if you do own any, because I do think it's one of those lines that people either have a lot into it, or don't really have anything into it at all. But let me know, because I am curious. Okay guys, thanks for watching, take care, okay,